Hi guys, Dave Wilson here again. Now, a few of you have asked if you can see a project, something being made from start to finish. Well, as it happens, I've got a commission in, and so I'm going to show you how to make a bezel set ring today. So, come with me and let me show you how we do it. So, the lady sent me some photographs here that I've printed out of what she's seen on the internet. So, just to clarify exactly what she wants me to make. So we're making a little ring with a bezel setting on the top. The coin is going to sit in that bezel. I'm going to make it in 3 stages. So here I've got some burr wire. So this is little thin silver strip, and it's got a little step halfway down. And the coin is going to sit in the top, like that. So we've got a little mount for it. I've then got some 0.5 silver sheet, and we're going to solder it onto the silver sheet and cut it out. So we've got the bezel section, and then once we've got that right, some D-shape 3x2mm wire, and we're going to make a little band out of that, and then that's going to form the band on the back of the ring. So let's get started. So I've got my burr wire here, and all I'm doing is I'm just bending it round with my fingers. So I'm just going to mark that there, and I'll saw it off. And that's not too bad. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to file that to get a perfectly flush edge. A little trick that I like to do once I've got it just about right is just to squeeze it together and use a very flat, thin pillar file, needle file, and just squeeze it together and just run it back and forth. And that just helps to make sure that those edges are perfectly flat and parallel. Just a little tip for you there. Oh, so there we go, perfect. So you've got a good tight joint and everything's nice and ready to solder. I'm using hard Pallion solder here. So here we go, safety goggles on, and we'll just start to heat the piece. The flux I'm using is borax, so it'll go white and fluff up like marshmallows, and then continue to heat, and the borax will go kind of brown and glassy, the solder's balling up there, and then the solder will melt. Remember, always heat both sides. Okay, I'm just going to pull that across here now. It's melted, but it's only on one side, so I'm just going to pull that across. There we go. A little bit of heat on the inside. Just make sure that we pull it through. And I think that's about done. So here we go. This is the little ring out of the petal pot now. Just been rinsed. So once I've got it perfectly round, I've got a ring file here, medium cut, so I'm just going to clean up the solder joint on the outside there and just on the inside there, and then we shall check it. So there we go, stage 1 completed. Now what I usually like to do with bezels, in fact you should do, is get a piece of sandpaper. This is 100, and just pop it on and just move it backwards and forwards. 2 reasons. First of all, it's got to make sure that that bottom is completely flat, especially where your solder joint is, and it's going to clean it, because don't forget we're going to solder this onto the base plate in a moment. So I've just finished sanding mine here, and what I've done is I've just sanded it just a little bit more, just to reduce it in height. That just means that the final bezel will just be a little bit thinner, and I think it'll make a nicer looking ring. So I've just sanded mine a little bit more. So there we go. So we are now ready to make the base for it. So I've got a piece here of 0.5mm. Now I could just mark it out and cut a square out with a pair of shears, but I've just noticed this is part of my Durston disc cutter set, and I noticed that I've got a disc cutter that is just a little bit bigger than that. So there we go, I've just cut out a little silver disc with my Durston disc cutter. If you're not familiar with that, check out my video. I've made a full video on the Durston disc cutter. There's going to be a little hole in this disc, so that when we make up the little bezel, there's going to be a hole in the back. Now, you could drill it, you could cut it out with a piercing saw, you could use a hole punch, but I've got here the Swanstrom heart-shaped disc cutters. Once again, if you're not familiar with this, check out my video. I've done a full video on the Durston disc cutter, and I've done a full video on this disc cutter. So there we go. I've just stamped out that little heart out of the middle there. Now, like I say, don't worry if you don't have a disc cutter or the Swanstrom heart cutter. Doesn't matter, don't worry about it. What you need to do is just put your little bezel onto a set of silver sheet. Just cut a square off, and then we can use that for soldering on. And if you want, you can mark the middle and drill a hole in it. Now, before you solder any sheet, don't forget to take the plastic film off it, the blue film off both sides. And it's advisable to just give it a rub down with some sandpaper, just to make sure that it's absolutely clean before you get the solder and flux on. So here's my little disc here. You might have a square piece depending on how you've chosen to do it. And lots of flux all the way around it. Make sure the flux goes all the way to the edge. And you want nice even coverage. If your flux isn't covering properly and it's pooling, that means that the silver is greasy, so you need to go and sand it again and clean it. Just pop that onto the top there. And I want to make sure that I've got an overlap all the way around, and then when it's soldered I can sand it. I am going to do everything with hard solder, and then if in the future somebody wants to adjust the ring, they can use easy solder to adjust the ring. So absolutely everything is going to be hard solder. So move him round, getting the heat on the base, and then getting the whole thing nice and warm. So the solder's just starting to melt now, so I'm just chasing it all the way around the edge, just making sure I get a nice continuous flow all the way around the edge. Now that's looking good on the inside, so I'm just going to move my heat now to the outside and just make sure that the solder has come all the way around the edge. And that is actually looking very nice. So examine it all the way around, make sure that it's all fully soldered, and then when you're happy with it, into the piddle. So I won't bore you to death with half an hour of filing. I'm going to go around the edge now, and then I'll show you when it's finished. So here we are, and so I've filed all the way around it and then gone round with some sandpaper on a buff stick, and this is what we've got. Now on the back I've just given it a light buffing on the buffing wheel, and the reason for that is that when we put the band on, it's going to be difficult to polish this area, so I've just made sure it's nice and clean and there's no scratch marks on it. Just a little finishing touch, I've put a little Celtic stamp here and a little 925 stamp on there. So that part I'm quite happy with now. I've not completely buffed the edges there because we're going to burnish these over the coin, so we'll polish those later. So for the moment that's looking okay. So the next stage is to make the actual band itself. So I've got here some 3mm by 2mm D-shaped wire. So the flat part is going to go on the inside and the outer is going to be curved. Now the lady has told me that she wants a size Q. So I've got my ring sizing stick here and I'm just going to get a size Q. Flat half round pliers, bend it round and then keep checking it on your ring sizer. Borax. Make sure the joint is well fluxed. Palline of solder. Once again I'm using hard solder here. Right, so I can start to apply a little heat now. Just heating up both sides of the joint, and there we go. Nicely done. Perfect size Q. So get it lined up in the middle, and I've just marked at either side there where it comes to the edge of that heart-shaped cutout. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut that section of the ring out, and I'm just going to file the ends flat so that the ring is going to sit like that with a gap in the middle. Hopefully you can appreciate how that works now. I've got that gap in the middle. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to file a little flat at each side there. And what this means now is that when I solder it onto the bezel there, I've got a nice flat surface there to solder it onto, and hopefully you can see that there, side on. Yeah, and you've really got to check it from all angles to make sure that it looks right. So I'm happy with that. I've got lots of solder around it, lots of flux, so let's get some heat on it. Just warming it all up. Once again, I'm using hard solder here. Now, I know that might be a bit of a risk because all the piece is made with hard solder, but I'm going to be careful where I put my heat. And I'm just going to focus it just in this area down at the bottom here where the joint is. There we go. The solder's going onto the band, and just a little bit of heat onto the back, and it goes onto the bezel. So I've got a nice clean solder joint, but I've not got solder everywhere and I've not damaged it. So this is what I'm saying, if you're careful with your soldering torch, you can actually make everything out of hard solder, which is what I do. It just takes practice and a bit of patience. So same again, applying heat to the band, the solder is starting to melt, and that's just gone. Pleased with that, cracking soldering job. Now if you look at it from the inside, you can just see the edge of the band inside that heart there. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to get inside here with some needle files and just contour the edges there, so we just get that heart back. Hopefully they can see that, yeah. So just by filing at either side. So just a nice little finishing touch. So here we have the finished ring, looking all nice and shiny. I've gone over the whole piece with a couple of 3M radial discs to take out the scratches. In some of the tight little areas there, I've used an E-flex polishing pin just to get into the little details there, get the scratches out. And then I've gone over the whole thing using a bristle brush and then a cotton mop using the Menzerner IP polish. So this is like Tripoli, but it's got a slight cutting action. And so this is giving it a nice, bright polish. So we're now ready to put the coin in. And I've got here a round burnisher. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to first secure the coin. So I do that by starting at the top, bottom, right, left. I'm just going to start at the top there. Just a light pressure, and I'm just pushing that bezel just round the top of the coin there. And then the same at the bottom here. Something else that you could use is a prong pusher or a bezel pusher. This is just a square tool with a handle, and that's quite useful. Just push that onto the rim there. So the coin is nice and tight now. I've done all four corners, so it's just a matter now of going in between and carrying on, just pushing the bezel over and working my way all the way around. And now switching back to my curved burnisher now, and I'm going to go all the way around the outside, and then I'm going to curve it, and I'm just going to go on the inside just to push that inner bezel right down tight onto the surface of the coin. So there we go. I think that's just about nice now. I've burnished out all the little tool marks. So just a light finish off with some Menzerner Super Finish, just to bring that front up nice and shiny. And there we go, all done. Let's go and take a look at it. So there we go, a really nice little ring. I particularly love the heart detail on the back. I think it's turned out really well. I hope you've enjoyed spending some time in my workshop and seeing how I make this, and hopefully you'll have a go at it yourself. So thank you very much for watching. I've been Dave Wilson, and I'll see you real soon on the next video. Bye for now.